you recording? Oh, good.
I can mess with it. Like, even if you mess up, just keep going.
Well, you can't fix that.
Well, I'm here with Ken Fox, owner of Paramount Record Shop here in Watertown, Wisconsin. We're up in his studio, Anam Studio, where he records, produces, and makes music. And he's a musician, a producer, a teacher, an avid music collector, and we're going to talk about the record store, the record side of the store. I'd like to talk about the beginnings of Paramount and how you ended up here.
It's been a long road. I guess I started selling records back in the 80s in my first store. We opened up as a vintage guitar shop and started looking around and sort of putting together a collection of records that guitar players would want to buy. Back then, the CD was just starting to come in, and
I remember.
yeah, it was kind of just still all about records. And we put in a bin of records in my first store, which actually was just like 3 blocks from here. And people liked it and people bought them. So we kept adding bins. And before we knew it, we were kind of a record shop.
All right. So the name Paramount Record Shop, where did that come from?
I took that from the studio in Grafton, Wisconsin. Some, if not most, of the important blues music from the heyday, which was basically 1922 to 1928, was recorded in Grafton, Wisconsin. And there's a studio there that recorded Son House, Skip James, Charlie Patton recorded there. And I decided to name my store as a tribute to the studio because so few people even know that it happened.
How long have you been buying and selling records now? I know you said you started in the 80s. Were you doing it a little bit before as far as business or just personal?
Mostly for myself. I mean, back then. I did work for another store that had a record department, but it was a jobber back then. So basically what jobbers did is they would show up once a month and they would stock the bins with whatever they thought people wanted to buy. So
A jobber.
yeah, so we sold records, but we didn't really have anything to do with which records or so other than that,
That's a good way to find new music, right?
Yeah.
You can just go in there and hey, this
yeah,
looks
they
good.
went by the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
So whatever was selling, that's what they would bring by, and they'd stock the bins, and we'd sell it. But I started collecting records when I was about 8, so my childhood was just like now. It was pretty much about records.
Do you remember what your first record you bought?
I remember getting an Animals record. I was telling you this the other day. There used to be a place called Penny's Warehouse down on Capitol Drive.
Yep, we were talking about this. Yep.
And my mom would take my brother and I shopping with her on Saturdays. So we'd go to this place called Treasure Island on Capitol Drive, and they had a great record section, but we'd often go down a few blocks, and this Penny's Warehouse would let people buy records from the penny stores and return them, and then they'd sell them for half price. So I could get 2 records for the price of 1.
Sure, perfect for a little kid.
Yeah.
Affordable. That's great.
So I started scratching and hustling and spending all my money on records way back then.
Ken's passion for the music business is all around us. In the bins and the display cases and the little professionally made record cubbies on the walls built by
My dad.
and they go from the lower bins all the way up to the ceiling just about, and then up above the ceiling is all the high-end guitars that Ken sells at his store. You know, people who enjoy records, record hunters, they search out for the best pressings they can find. We want to talk about these pressings and how to find them, and a lot of them you can find here at Ken's shop. And so the pressing itself, if we're talking about vinyl, what would be some of the best pressings that we could get?
Usually the earliest pressing is the best pressing. There's a lot of great reissues coming out these days, but generally speaking, I would say that the stuff that really, really excites me is like the very first pressings. So there's plenty of info available on the net these days. You can go and look at sites that have all the various labels of, say, Blue Note records, or Verve records. You can go look at how the labels have changed, and but
So many different labels.
yeah, there's a lot of labels, but the reality of it is you're kind of stuck with whatever you can find. So the early pressings go for a little more money, and I would definitely suggest paying the money when you can find them, because they definitely sound better. The concept is that the early pressings were basically on a mother stamper that was used very little. So, as time went on, that mother stamper got more worn and more worn and more worn. So
Yeah, the stampers, as I understand it, they do a run of a bunch of records, and then they have to get another stamper, and that'll lead into something that we'll talk about with the dead wax and run out. But the earlier the better.
yep.
Definitely the earlier the better.
Yeah, and there was just a magic about the early, like late 50s pressings. There's just a vibe about them that's really cool. The covers were really nice. It wasn't just the records. The covers were made out of a certain kind of paper that you don't see today. I mean, it was just beautiful stuff.
We talk about U.S. pressings versus import pressings. There's a general consensus that an import pressing is probably a better quality pressing than, say, a U.S. pressing. For example, we could go with the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd. Collectors are after those early pressings. What's the difference between, say, an American issue of Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, as opposed to a UK pressing of Dark Side of the Moon?
There is a difference. I mean, there's a difference in the covers too. The type of paper, the covers tend to be glossier. But as far as the records themselves, I think it's more in the mastering. I think that they generally may have put a little more effort into mastering the records, than the US guys were.
It's interesting, and it's universal too. It's not just, well, they did a few of them here and a few of them there. It's people who collect records. They want that UK pressing. Those original Led Zeppelin or Beatles UK pressings.
Or German pressings have a really good reputation too. So as far as the type of vinyl they were using, I don't think there was that much difference in the actual vinyl. But like I say, if I had to pinpoint one thing, it was probably mastering.
Okay, mastering. The mastering engineer. All right. So leading into that then, the master, whoever masters it. Now, there are better mastering engineers than others. That makes a difference, of course, like what you just said. Whoever's mastering it.
Yeah, these days particularly. I mean, these days the mastering engineers probably have way more to do with the actual quality of the reissue. I mean, Kevin Gray is a perfect example. Like, almost anything that he masters is going to be a quality reissue.
He does a lot of the Blue Note stuff.
Yep.
The Tone Poets, the classics, the 80s. Yeah, he's one of them. And then for the older masters like Robert Ludwig, he's well regarded, and there are many more we could talk about.
Yeah, he's kind of the first wave superstar, I would say. And Kevin Gray obviously is a biggie these days, but there's a lot more too. I mean, there's a lot of them. And what I find is particular labels tend to have better mastering than other labels, only because they seek out the best guys. So like those Tone Poets that you mentioned, those are all excellent. And Kevin Gray did some of them, but he didn't do all of them, But that particular reissue series tends to have certain standards. And, I think it's very consistent.
Yes, I would agree with that. That's one thing that I've noticed is the consistency of those particular tone poets and the 80s and the classics. That's good, because if you're looking for some nice jazz records, you're certainly, the Blue Notes from way back when cost quite a bit of money, and you can get something that's not the original, of course. It's not a deep groove original Blue Note, but you're gonna get something that's pretty darn close to what the original sounds like, don't you think?
Well, mastered from the original tapes, which is the Blue Note. All the Blue Note stuff seems to be. I mean, they seem to be able to find the tapes, and but quality of cover. I mean, the covers that they're doing are phenomenal, and
they are.
Yeah, it's a really
nice
good,
covers.
Heavy 180 gram, nicely pressed reissue.
So, yeah, those are worth seeking out if you're a jazz fan. Definitely.
And that's kind of the heart of what I do in the store, is I find these series or particular companies that I like, and I tend to carry stuff that I know is good, and it might cost a few bucks more than people often want to put out for a reissue, but once they do and they realize the quality they're getting,
they're coming back.
But
Yeah.
but I tend to carry stuff I really believe in, you know. And you know, there's a lot of crap out there. Like any industry, supply and demand, and when demand is up, you know, then there's people that sensationalize the process, which is what's happening these days, and they put out crap because they realize that the vast majority of young record buyers anyway don't probably know the difference. So they're gonna pay their $30, whether it's, you know, this company or that company. And so I sort of look at it like it's my job to sort that stuff out for people.